In the meantime, I did want to brief you on some other major headlines of the week. And the latest is out of Sean Diddy Combs' trial is that we have learned that it is now set for May 5th to be exact, in his sex trafficking case. Combs' lawyers have been trying unsuccessfully to get Combs freed on bail, and he has been held at a federal jail in Brooklyn since his September 16th arrest. Meanwhile, his attorneys have filed an appeal to the Second U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals after being denied bail twice. In that appeal, lawyers for Combs asked a panel of judges to reverse the bail finding, saying that the proposed bail package, quote, would plainly stop him from posing a danger to anyone or contacting any witnesses. Two judges previously concluded that Combs would be a danger to the community if he were to be released from jail, concluding that he was a threat to tamper with witnesses and obstruct the continuing investigation. At a bail hearing 3 weeks ago, a judge rejected a $50 million bail package that also included home detention and electronic monitoring. Also of note, during this past week's proceedings, a prosecutor argued that the jailed hip-hop mogul's lawyers were trying to exclude a critical piece of evidence by claiming it was leaked by the government. Assistant U.S. Attorney Emily Johnson took issue with the defense lawyer's argument in a submission late Wednesday that the U.S. Department of Homeland Security leaked a video to the media of Combs punching and kicking his girlfriend, R&B singer Cassie, at an L.A. hotel hallway back in 2016. Now, to break this all down for us, I do want to bring in Brian Claypool, who is a defense attorney. Brian, thank you for taking the time to speak with us today. We appreciate it.
Yeah, hey, Stephanie, great to be back with you.
So I want to ask you this, because that is a significant development in that a trial date has now been set for May 5th. We do know that Diddy's attorneys had been pushing for a speedy trial. So May 5th, that's about 7 months away. And I'm curious, from your standpoint, is that a win for the defense attorneys to get this scheduled for May? Or do you think that the prosecutors are going to still be able to delay this, claiming they need more time?
Yes, Stephanie, great question. The Sixth Amendment to the Constitution guarantees a criminal defendant to the right to a speedy trial. What's a speedy trial? There's really no statute that gives the number of days you can get a trial date, but typically the U.S. Supreme Court has interpreted this to mean up to around 120 days, 90 to 120 days. So I was a little surprised that P. Diddy's lawyers didn't try to seek a quicker trial date sometime early next year. Why? Because let's break this down. The biggest charge against P. Diddy is the racketeering, the RICO charge, right? Racketeering means that Diddy allegedly formed what's called a criminal enterprise, that he used his music business to carry out sex trafficking. What does that require you to prove as a prosecutor? It's a conspiracy. That means you need at least two people to agree to carry out this criminal enterprise. Remember the charges brought by Fani Willis in Georgia against former President Trump. Remember how many other people were co-indicted? I think there were over 10. Here, the federal prosecutors have not indicted anybody but P. Diddy. They don't have a case yet until they indict other co-conspirators. You need more than one person. You need more than P. Diddy. So if I was representing P. Diddy, I'd say, let's get to trial tomorrow, because that might gut the prosecutor's case. And that leads to another point. Why didn't federal prosecutors do it the other way? They've had 6 months since the raids on Miami and LA. Why didn't they focus on developing charges against the alleged co-conspirators, get them indicted? That'll put more pressure on them than to cop a plea deal, and then set up the charges against Diddy later, because remember, the clock starts ticking from the date of the indictment.
And I wanted to ask you that, Brian, because I would imagine that there is some sort of strategy behind what prosecutors are doing. But as you mentioned, he is the only name in that indictment so far. So why is it? Is it that they are bluffing and that they don't have any other names? Or are they strategically holding out and withholding those names?
Yeah, here's what I think went down. I think the prosecutors were very bold when they brought out these charges. Remember, they even said, hey, if there's more victims, come forward. We're going to be indicting some other people. And I think what's happening behind the scenes, again, it's my reasonable guesstimation here, is I think federal prosecutors, Stephanie, thought they could go to these other co-conspirators, workers for P. Diddy, security guys, people that helped him within the music business. I think prosecutors thought they were going to go to these guys and potentially ladies and say, hey, look, we're going to indict you. Let's cop a plea deal. And then, you'll get a plea deal and you don't have to be, charged any further. I think what happened here is that prosecutors were not willing to give plea deals without jail time. I think that's the thing that has created a logjam for prosecutors. I think none of these other potential defendants within this alleged racketeering and criminal enterprise want to agree to a plea deal that involves them going to jail. And I think that's what has caused all of these behind the scenes negotiations with co-conspirators to fall apart, because we've been hearing rumors about, there's going to be some new superseding indictments. If there are, that's likely to be these other co-conspirators that they couldn't cop plea deals with.
And Brian, as you mentioned, the clock is ticking. When might we expect that to happen? I would imagine if the prosecutors don't name other co-conspirators, that would greatly damage their case.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, there's another issue you've got to look at too. If you're repping P. Diddy, even let's say 3 weeks from now, you get a superseding indictment and federal prosecutors name, 4 other alleged co-conspirators of P. Diddy to prove up these RICO charges. P. Diddy's lawyers, Stephanie, are going to come into court and say, hey, wait a minute, you can't bring these charges. It's going to delay the trial that's set for May. And the U.S. Supreme Court has laid out 4 factors that the courts have to follow to determine whether the prosecutors have to go forward with a trial in May. And that is prejudice to the defendant. What caused the delay, Stephanie? That's a factor that the courts are going to look at. And here, if you're repping P. Diddy, you're like, hey, you should have had your ducks in order in September when you indicted P. Diddy. Why didn't you indict these other co-conspirators then? So look, I think there's going to be a dogfight, even with these superseding indictments, where P. Diddy's lawyers are going to say, look, sorry, you're too late on these charges. We want to go to trial on the current charges you have. And it'll be an interesting appellate issue.
Absolutely. I also wanted to ask about this third attempt to get Sean Diddy Combs bail. Is that even realistic? I mean, he's been denied twice. Now it comes before a panel of judges. Do you think he'll actually get bail this third time around?
Yeah, usually, Stephanie, when 2 other courts have said no bail, it's pretty rare where this isn't a higher court, it's now a panel of judges within the I think the Second Circuit who are going to decide this. Usually you have uniformity among judges because judges don't typically like to step on the toes of other judges, right? So I'd be surprised if you see this reversed. But as a criminal defense lawyer, putting aside me being a defense lawyer, I think from a purely logical perspective and purely from the standpoint of what's the purpose of setting bail, I do think this is excessive because P. Diddy's lawyers said, look, $50 million, we'll wear an ankle monitor, we'll be subject to home detention. Where's this guy going to go, Stephanie? How's he going to go outside and try to intimidate any witnesses? And moreover, look, they should have set at least a conditional bail where, hey, P. Diddy, we'll agree to this, but if you go out and violate this one time, then your bail is revoked. So I think it is a bit excessive, but is it going to be reversed? Not likely.
I also wanted to ask you about the video that Sean Diddy Combs' attorneys say the U.S. government leaked, and that was showing him beating his then girlfriend in an L.A. hotel hallway. Given that argument, and obviously the prosecutors have pushed back against it, but is it realistic that video could be excluded from evidence?
Yeah, that's the $1 million question. And it is possible that the video could be, precluded from coming into evidence. And here's why. Because remember what we talked about earlier, the main charge here is the RICO charge, right? The racketeering charge. That involves proving that prosecutors, that P. Diddy controlled these women, not just that freak-offs took place, but he controlled them. He drugged their drinks. He held them hostage afterwards so that they couldn't show injuries. He withheld money that he was paying to them to support their lives after this happened. Prosecutors have to prove that, right? Why is that important? Because if prosecutors can't prove that there were sex workers in that hotel room with Cassie, because that's what I think we're hearing, there were sex workers in there. If there's no proof that there were sex workers in there, and it was just P. Diddy and Cassie having some kind of encounter in that bedroom, then it doesn't rise to the level of a RICO or racketeering charge or a sex trafficking charge. That's what his lawyers will argue, and therefore it doesn't come in. So the prosecutor's going to have that evidence that some kind of sex workers were in that hotel room to keep it out. But look, the bigger question is, even if it's precluded, is how do you get a fair jury pool who hasn't seen that video? And that's where jury selection is going to be really important here, to do individual voir dire, ask every single juror, did you see that video on TV? And that's the only way you could potentially get a fair trial.
Brian, obviously there are a lot of moving parts and more developments are likely on the horizon. You know, from your perspective as a defense attorney, what else are you focused on?
Well, I mean, look, let's call it what it is. And again, I'm not here siding with PD. I'm just giving you the legal analysis. And I, as a defense lawyer, want to see a trial in this case based on evidence, justice, the Constitution, not some kind of Hollywood movie script, some kind of sensationalized level of justice with, I mean, for example, Stephanie, every day I get on my Instagram here in LA, I'm seeing another picture of a celebrity at a P. Diddy party. And then everybody's supposed to deduce that that celebrity is somehow involved with P. Diddy. There was a picture on Instagram the other day with P. Diddy touching Justin Bieber on the chest in a video 7 years ago. Then it was alleged that P. Diddy is patting down Justin Bieber to make sure he's not wired to have a conversation. That's what I'm worried that this case is going to become, some kind of, movie script and sensationalism versus what is the hard evidence? What are the facts you've got to prove? What are the elements you've got to prove? And if you're the prosecutors, you better have your ducks in order. You've got to have at least a couple of victims, number one. Number two, you've got to have what we talked about. Where are the co-conspirators that created this organized criminal enterprise to carry out sex trafficking? Number three, where's the physical evidence? Where are bank statements showing that money was paid to some of these victims, that money was paid to sex workers? That should be easy to prove. So prosecutors have that tangible evidence, then I think it's going to be a very strong case against P. Diddy. P. Diddy's hope is going to be that these alleged co-conspirators don't cooperate, and they all say, look, these were freak-offs, we didn't drug anybody, and we didn't hold them hostage, and therefore it doesn't amount to racketeering.
And as you mentioned, Brian, this all comes down to evidence and facts. As always, we appreciate you joining us here on Live Now from Fox to give your legal perspective. We appreciate it.
Beth, thanks for having me, Stephanie.